Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome to another great Wednesday on Catholic Answers Live. A couple of great guests for you today. We start with a pro-life open forum. If you have questions about life, whether it's at its beginnings or its endings, or maybe when it's in crisis in the middle of life, those questions are all welcome today. 888-318-7884 is the number. Maybe you're not a convinced pro-life person and you'd like some justification from us about why we are pro-life people. We'd be happy to answer those questions as well. 888-318-7884. Our guest this hour is international pro-life speaker Stephanie Gray. She's the co-founder of the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, where she spent 12 years as the executive director. She's the author of Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth, as well as A Physician's Guide to Discussing Abortion. She holds a certification with distinction in healthcare ethics from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Stephanie Gray, thanks for being with us. Hi, Stephanie. Are you there with us?
I am.
Oh, yeah. I had a little sound problem. That's all right. Okay, so so I assume you. I'm just going to assume this. Maybe I shouldn't assume this. Maybe I shouldn't assume things about you. But I'm assuming you may have participated in some pro-life activities this week.
Yes. Well, you assumed correctly if you saw my Facebook page. I was in 3 American marches. I started speaking at the march in St. Augustine, Florida, which was about just over a week ago. And then I flew to Washington, D.C. and spoke at the March for Life conference the day before the march in D.C. And then the next day I flew to Phoenix, Arizona, where they had 5,000 people marching there. So it was a joy to participate in so many important American events.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful. Something I noticed, perhaps this is cynical, I don't know, but it seemed to me that protests of another nature on the same weekend. They were protests having, we usually call women's marches or that kinds of thing, and you know, God bless them, people protest all kinds of things, but it just seemed to me, I'm not fussing about their protests or their observations, but it didn't seem to me that you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pro-life people coming out around the country got nearly the attention. Did you notice that discrepancy?
Absolutely. There's a serious imbalance there. You have, 400,000 pro-lifers in DC and very minimal secular media coverage, of course. Faith-based coverage was very good. EWTN had live coverage all day. But in terms of the broad secular media, there definitely is a bias against pro-life people and in favor of those who support abortion, as we saw with the coverage of the Women's March the following
888-318-7884 is our number, 888-318-7884. I'm still having just a little bit of trouble hearing Stephanie. Maybe we'll have to switch phone lines. I'm not sure, Stephanie, what we'll have to do. But there's also, I suppose, it's kind of a positive in some of the way the media coverage happened, because I noticed this year a lot of debate about whether pro-life women were really women, I guess, is a way to, like, there's a certain sense of it's like, well, no, it's the Women's March women who are the real women, those advocating for abortion. And I thought it provided a lot of opportunity to push back on that and say, no, in fact, most women are not pro-abortion, and lots of intelligent, accomplished women are pro-life.
Well, certainly you even look at the lineup of speakers at a lot of pro-life events. Tim Tebow's mother, Pam, gave a presentation both in DC as well as Phoenix, where I was, talking about making a very pro-life decision in a crisis pregnancy, in that when she was pregnant with Tim, there were health complications that were super serious, and she nonetheless carried through with testing and the mercy and provision. And there are so many female pro-life leaders who make valuable contributions to the cause, for sure.
888-318-7884. It is Pro-Life Open Forum today. Pro-Life Open Forum means any question that you have about the ethics of life in its earliest stages, life in its end stages, or life throughout, we're happy to take those calls, 888-318-7884. I will remind you that Sanctity of Life Month is this month. The marches have happened in most places and continue to happen in some places. And in honor of that, we want to send you a couple of books for for virtually nothing, $5 for Persuasive Pro-Life, How to Talk About Our Culture's Toughest Issues, Trent Horn's wonderful book about talking about life issues, and then Making the Case for Life, the video that covers much of the same ground. All of that is available for 70% off. That's just $5 each at shop.catholic.com. Go to shop.catholic.com. Already lots of calls. Stephanie, you feel maybe we'll take a call before we go to the break?
Sure, let's go straight to the lines.
All right, let's go to Diana in Huntington Beach, California, listening on Catholic radio up there. Diana, your question.
Okay, so it's actually Dana, but no offense taken.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't read that properly, I suppose.
No worries. Listen, here's my kind of question, is that I know that from listening to Catholic radio that Catholics are really opposed to gay marriage, but at the same time, we do have large numbers of gay people in the United States getting married. And my question is should we be looking at those marriages as a potential help in resolving the problem of abortion by creating a system where pregnant women who are going to get an abortion would maybe be introduced and create maybe a government-sponsored business arrangement with gay married people who have been properly screened to adopt those children who would otherwise be aborted. And I look at the gay community as, why are they even pro-choice? They are very strong pro-choice advocates, and you have to ask yourself why. They don't have unwanted pregnancies in that community. And I feel that they're pro-choice because of the concept of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they vote pro-choice as a way of kind of fighting back against what they feel is oppression by the pro-life movement. And I think this olive branch should be extended to them to say, hey, you might be part of the solution, and convert them from pro-choice advocates to pro-life advocates by really coming out and asking them, how about raising some of these children that would otherwise be killed by their own mothers?
All right, Dana, thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, Dana. And what comes to mind is I think the issue is not that there aren't people available and willing to adopt children who would otherwise be aborted. The issue is their mothers don't want to opt for adoption. They want abortion, because adoption is the hardest option in that in the moment, you're going to fall in love with that child. You're going to bond with that child. You're going to want that child. And then you're going to place that child in the arms of someone else. And that's really hard. Whereas abortion says, I'm going to get rid of you before I bond with you, before I connect with you. And therefore, that seems easier in the moment in the woman's mind than adoption does. So I would say, trying to increase the number of people, such as appealing to homosexual couples to choose adoption, isn't actually going to solve the problem, because it's a problem of the mindset of the woman in crisis, where she needs to be convinced that abortion isn't the solution to her problem. There already are couples waiting to adopt children. And in many of these cases, if the woman opts against abortion, she many times won't even opt for those couples to adopt. She'll just parent the child herself.
Dana, thank you very much for that question. We have to head off to a break right now. Stephanie Gray is our guest. Stephanie is the author of Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth. It's a pro-life open forum, so if you have a question about the pro-life position in any stage of life, give us a call, 888-318-7884. We'll be right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Bishop Robert Barron. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and I'm here with a couple of very special offers for all of you interested in standing up for the rights of the unborn. January is Pro-Life Month, and to get as many people as we can involved in the pro-life cause, we're making my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and my DVD, Making the Case for Life, available for just $5 each. That's a saving of over 70%. I wrote this book and I made this DVD specifically with you in mind, to help you engage in sustained and meaningful dialogue and give you the tools you need to change people's hearts and minds, so that together we might build up a pro-life culture, one person, one conversation at a time. To get your copies of my book Persuasive Pro-Life or my DVD Making the Case for Life for just $5, call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Just like the saints of the Counter-Reformation, our own souls are in constant need of reform, of reconversion to God and His will for us. We struggle with sin. We become distracted in prayer. We find it hard to be loving and easy to be selfish. In Reform Yourself, Sean McAfee shows you how these magnificent saints can be guides to your own personal transformation. We all need to reform our souls. Let the saints who reformed the church show you how. Order your copy of Reform Yourself today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, Pro-Life Open Forum this hour with Stephanie Gray, the author of, several things, including A Physician's Guide to Discussing Abortion and Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth. Love Unleashes Life also happens to be the name of her website. If you want to find out all about what Stephanie is up to and get all kinds of materials you can use there, just go to loveunleasheslife.com. Stephanie, as I was telling you at the break, every single line is full, so I think we just work our way through callers. Joaquin in Las Vegas, Nevada, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio. Your question for Stephanie Gray.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. I was wondering, it occurred to me, I've never really known the official Catholic position on the death penalty. And then the question of, is it incongruent to be pro-life and then believe in the death penalty? So a kind of related question there.
Very good question. I would say that if you look at something like abortion, that is always wrong because it's directly and intentionally ending the life of an innocent human being. Excuse me. But if you look at something like the death penalty, there may be cases where that could be justified on the basis that a society needs to use that amount of force in order to stop an act of aggression, in order to stop someone from being an aggressor to an individual or to society. So in that case, it's not about directly and intentionally killing an innocent person, nor is it about even directly intentionally killing a guilty person so much as stopping an aggressor from committing an act of aggression. So that means in practice, I would say that we don't really need to do the death penalty because there are ways to prevent people from being aggressors to society without actually executing them, such as, placing them in prisons and so forth. But there would be an important difference between allowing force to stop an act of aggression versus something like an attack on the preborn child where there is no aggressor, there is no act of aggression.
Does that make sense to you, Joaquin?
Well, yes, I understand about the pro-life and not taking a child's life. I understand that. So I guess my question is, what is the church's position on the death penalty? You touched on that a little bit with regard to stopping an aggressor or stopping future crimes. But somebody that's been already imprisoned, convicted of a crime, and now has been sentenced to death, I take it from your answer that the church's position is that that's not acceptable.
Sai, do you want to wade in there? I mean, you
Well, I
probably
would just-
read more on the death penalty than I have.
Yeah, first of all, Joaquin, you should know it's a somewhat controversial topic among Catholics, and various positions are taken. But most recently, the popes, particularly and most notably Pope John Paul II, have said that there's a practical judgment to be made that if you have someone in prison and the prison system is effective in protecting society, you don't need to take anyone's life. And so it's not an absolute claim of no government can ever take the life of a prisoner, because that's not Catholic teaching. There are times when that's the only way a society could defend itself. But the basic thrust of Catholic teaching in recent years has been that modern society is able to defend itself by other means, and that this either radically reduces or eliminates the need for the death penalty.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the answer.
Joaquin, thank you very much for that call. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. We go now to Margaret in Lafayette, Louisiana, listening on 90.5 FM. Margaret, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Hi, Stephanie, and thank you all for taking my call as well. Mine is more of an end-of-life care question. So my father had a stroke years ago, and we were told that he was brain dead. And we were advised by his physicians not to do anything extraordinary. He wasn't on life support or anything. But we did not do anything extraordinary as far as feeding and, keeping an IV or anything. We just slowly let him die. Is that the right way to have handled that? I've always questioned that. What is the church's teaching on that for end of life?
Sure.
Is it did we choose to kill him? Because that is kind of the thing that I go back and forth with.
I would need to know more specifics about your specific situation to be able to speak to that. But I can speak in more general terms because we don't have time to go into the fine nuances of your dad's condition. But a couple important things that need to be kept in mind. The first is that brain death refers to complete and total, irreversible cessation of the entire brain, including the brain stem. So if that is the case, then the person truly is dead. So if that was the case with your dad, he would have literally been a corpse very quickly. And it sounds like that wasn't the case. Now, there is the reality that when someone endures some type of health crisis, that it may be a crisis so severe that it is going to be the end of their life. And what the church teaches is that there's a difference between ordinary and extraordinary care. Ordinary care is not excessively burdensome and has a hope of benefit. Extraordinary care can be excessively burdensome and have no hope of benefit. And so if it's determined that a particular intervention is excessively burdensome and will not have a hope of benefit, then it is acceptable to decline that type of intervention. So for example, if someone has had cancer and they've had multiple interventions with chemotherapy and it's not working, and there's a very low percentage that another round of chemo might help them, they can decline that. They can say, look, the cancer is taking my life. It's excessively burdensome and no hope of benefit to do another intervention. I'm going to accept death as near. So in the same way, in other conditions, if that is determined, we still have to provide basic care, ordinary care, food, water, unless those two things would cause more distress to the person based on their specific condition. So those are the general terms. If you want to go through in more detail what your dad had, just to see if there's anything that perhaps was handled improperly, I would encourage you to contact the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and their website is ncbcenter.org, and they have a phone line that you can call regarding ethical medical dilemmas, and they can provide an ethical analysis that in which they have the time to go into the details of what type of condition someone may face. And so if your conscience is bothering you about anything, then I would encourage you to go through the details with them and their consult line.
Okay, well, I feel pretty certain that probably not. We were in a Catholic hospital. So, just that being said right there, I don't think that, that would have been promoted, but sometimes it just kind of feels like, geez, did we not do something? Should we have done something, and we did not. Right. But,
yeah, and
it was very helpful, though.
Okay, good. And I'm sorry for your loss.
Margaret, thank you very, very much for that call. It is a pro-life open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. If you have questions of a pro-life nature that you've maybe always wanted answered, or you want to know what the Catholic position is on that, or why maybe you have spotted what you think is an inconsistency in the pro-life position, all of those questions are more than welcome. We'd be happy to talk with you about them. 888-318-7884. Stephanie Gray is our guest. And we go now to Pat in Houston, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Pat, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Okay, thanks. I don't quite see a lot of difference between the type of birth control pills that prevent ovulation and the accepted family planning process. So can you try to explain the difference? I don't believe in birth control that would kill, a baby that has been conceived. But most of the birth control pills that I'm aware of just prevent ovulation altogether. So I appreciate explanation of the difference.
Sure. Well, if you read the medical literature on the birth control pill, while it does speak of its primary mechanism to suppress ovulation, so there is no egg for sperm to get to if a woman is sexually active, there are other mechanisms, one of which described in the literature is to change cervical mucus to make it more difficult for sperm to get to egg. But if that mechanism fails, as it sometimes does, the third mechanism is to change the lining of the uterus, to make it thinner rather than its normal thickness, so that if a woman does have breakthrough ovulation, if sperm get through the mucus to the egg, and if that new life is conceived, then the woman would have a very thin endometrium lining, the lining of the uterus, so that when that new human moves into the uterus to implant, may not be able to and could bleed out in a very early abortion. And we know women on the birth control pill have a thinner endometrium than women who aren't on the birth control pill, because we know a woman on the pill has a lighter period than a woman not on the pill, which is indicative of a thinner uterine lining, which means it could be inhospitable to the implantation of a new human being. So a lot of people are unaware of this possible consequence of the pill. More fundamentally, I think what your question is getting at, if I heard you right, is what is the difference, even if there's not an abortifacient defect? Let's say you have a barrier method, like a condom that's preventing sperm from getting to the egg. What is the difference between that and something like natural family planning, which the church would permit a couple to use? The very important difference is natural family planning works with how God designed our bodies. God designed the man to always have fertility. God designed the woman to not always have fertility. He designed a season for us to be infertile every month, and then a short window for a woman to be fertile. And so using natural family planning, determining when to have sex or when not to have sex based on the natural fertility of your body, is using your body as it was designed. But when you use something like a condom or any other type of birth control, what you're doing is you're engaging in an act of sex that has fertility tied into it, and you're suppressing that fertility, whether you're withholding the sperm in the case of the man or you're suppressing the egg in the case of the woman. And that goes against the nature of how God designed our bodies. We can look at it this way. Throughout the scriptures, people were maimed and sick, and they would go to Jesus for healing. He saw the body out of order and essentially reordered it to health. But Jesus never found a healthy person and disfigured them or created a pathology within their body. So when we look at fertility, that's a sign of our bodies working right. And so to suppress that, to deny that, to change that, is to do the exact opposite of what Jesus did in his encounters with people. Is that helpful?
Yes, I appreciate that explanation.
Pat, thank you very much for that call, and it gives me a chance to plug too. If you're willing to do a little more reading on this, Dr. Stacy Trasankos, chemist Dr. Stacy Trasankos, has an article up on our website right now, just published in the online magazine, Catholic Answers Magazine Online. And it's Can Contraception Cause Abortions? So that it's a technical explanation or a scientific explanation of just exactly what Stephanie was just talking about some of the effects of contraception on a woman's body and what that means. But also she gets into then a discussion of what a virtuous life is. So you might take a look at that if you'd like more information, or if anyone would like more information on how contraception actually works, what its connection to abortion is, and some ways to think about the body differently. 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. It is a pro-life open forum with Stephanie Gray today. Stephanie, you also debate sometimes, right? You get involved in debates? So,
yes, I was just a few months ago, I was at Cornell University debating for philosophy professor. And the next 3 months, February, March, and April, I have a debate each month on university campuses, including debating an abortionist.
And how stressful is that for you? Like, is it stressful, or do you? I do not do debates because mostly I can't remember what I was going to say once I get there. So I'm just curious. You're debating some of the best minds in the world from the opposite direction. How stressful do you find that?
Generally, I kind of thrive in that environment. I guess it's a special grace that the Lord has given me to be able to do it. It certainly takes a lot of preparation, researching the mindset of the person you're debating. A philosophy professor presents generally a very different argument from an abortionist. So, but yeah, with good research and prayer, it works well.
We'll get some more information on upcoming debates when we come back then. Stephanie Gray is our guest. It is a pro-life open forum today. 888-31-TRUTH is our number if you'd like to talk with Stephanie about any aspect of the pro-life position. 888-318-7884. We'll be right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I want you to have such confidence in the Lord that you'll find such hope at seeing the beauty of the Lord, the majesty of God. What did our Lord say, huh? If your sins are as scarlet, what's going to happen? They shall be made white as snow.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and I'm here with a very special offer for all of you interested in standing up for the rights of the unborn. January is Pro-Life Month, and to get as many people as we can involved in the pro-life cause, we're making my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, available for just $5 a copy. That's a savings of over 70%. I wrote this book specifically with you in mind, to help you engage in sustained and meaningful dialogue and give you the tools you need to change people's hearts and minds, so that together we might build up a pro-life culture, one person, one conversation at a time. To get your copies of my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, for just $5 a copy, call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com.
Whatever I have learned, writes Catholic Answers founder Carl Keating, I have learned from the masters of the craft. In his new book, Booked for Life, a bibliographic memoir of an accidental apologist, Carl gives future generations a roadmap of what it takes and what it means to become a Catholic apologist. In the way only Carl can, he recounts numerous real-life situations he has encountered in his long career that illustrate the apologetic lessons he's learned. Then, drawing on a lifetime of experience, Carl reveals the books that helped him learn to defend the Catholic faith. Order your copy of Booked for Life today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour, Stephanie Gray, speaks all over the world about pro-life issues. She's the author of Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth, and the co-founder of the Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform. And we're very pleased to have her here to answer your questions about any aspect of the pro-life position, whether it's something you need some clarification on, some help explaining to someone else, or maybe it's something that you'd like to challenge us with, that maybe you think we have not thought of, or an angle we haven't taken. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. We go now to Jay in Canada, listening on EWTN. Jay, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Stephanie, I live in Canada, and it's my understanding that we don't even have an abortion law. And, it's basically is one of those things. But I'm wondering, because you worked for a Canadian organization for pro-life, do you know, because you never hear about anything about, anybody fighting to change the rules and to create new laws, but do do you know where the Canadian government is going, or where if there's a group that actually is trying to limit the abortion, and as far as when they can have and the number of weeks and what have you? Are you aware of anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. There's both bad news and good news. So the bad news is, as you've rightly pointed out, there aren't any laws restricting abortion in Canada. It can happen through all 9 months of pregnancy. It's paid for with Canadian tax dollars, and can happen for any reason, such as if a couple want a male child and they're pregnant with a female child, they can have a paid for abortion in Canada. The good news, there are a couple organizations that are working to try to change the law and create legal protections for preborn children. So one such organization is called Right Now, and their philosophy is we need to make change right now. And they're working across the country, both provincially and nationally, to try to work towards pro-life legislation. And there's another organization called We Need a Law, and they are doing similar parallel work that's very complementary to what Right Now is doing. And then beyond that, you have organizations like the one I used to work for that was mentioned, that I co-founded, CCBR, where they're more education-based, trying to shift the minds of the masses so that there is support for the organizations like Right Now and We Need a Law, who try to get political, public policy change once you have that public opinion shift. So being a fellow Canadian, I certainly would encourage you to look up these organizations and see how you can get involved.
How's that sound, Jay?
Sounds good.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Jay. 888-318-7884 is the number. Sometimes you almost get the impression that Canada, with its embrace now more and more of suicide and euthanasia, that they're heading off a cliff. But it's good to hear there's so many good people in Canada, and an intelligent conversation will in fact convince lots of people. We just have to keep having that conversation.
Right, and I think we need to remember, from the beginning of the world, there's always been sin, right? Adam and Eve,
right.
Created the original sin, and then you have Cain killing Abel, and we've got murder, we have bloodshed, and every period of history we see injustice, we see attacks on human life. But every period of history, there are also bright, vibrant lights that are trying to shine in the darkness and resist these injustices. And so we have to be that wherever we are, and try to be a force for good amidst the darkness.
Amen. Amen. Well said. John in Pleasanton, Kansas, listening on 93.7 FM. You are on with Stephanie Gray. Your question, John.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. And Stephanie, thanks for all the work that you're doing to promote life. I guess the question that I have, and what I want to explore is this intellectually honest? But to me, there seems to be a parallel between kind of the evil of abortion today and the argument, if you would, that a child is property, in essence, of the mother, and slavery back in the day. And just, I mean, if you were to poll folks today about should slavery be legal, you'll never get 100% of people to agree, but I think 99.9 would agree that absolutely not. But to me, as I kind of look at the two evils, it seems like there are a lot of parallels. So I'm wondering, is there literature out there or any books that I could be directed to? And it, I guess then, is the argument intellectually honest? And if so, why do we not hear more about that parallel of those two evils?
How about that, slavery?
Sure. I think you raise a very valid point. It's a point that I've done and raised in the history of my pro-life work, and that is that we need to learn from the past. And anytime we can find common ground with someone we're dialoguing with and bridge from the common ground to the uncommon ground to hopefully make that common as well, the better. So when you start with something like slavery and you ask someone, do you believe slavery is wrong? And they say yes, then you ask why. And they say, because you can't treat another human being as though they're property, as though they're an object. So then we say, okay, well, if you agree as I do that we may not treat human beings as property, as objects, why then would we permit abortion when that also involves treating a human being as property or as an object? And then if they respond by saying, well, the fetus isn't a human being, but a slave is, so then we can ask, well, what is your evidence for the fetus not being a human being? If the parents are human, what else could the offspring be other than a human being. Even take the slave that they would protect, that they think is equal. When did that individual begin his or her life? Did the slave become human at the age of 5, at the point of birth, or at the moment of fertilization? And so you can use that, element of history and people's revulsion towards what we did in the past, and bring that into the abortion discussion in order to show they should have the same feelings of revulsion about abortion and about the treatment of the preborn child as though they're disposable, the way historically that happened with victims of the slave trade.
John,
in terms of
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, in terms of books. So, you know what, there's several books that actually look at parallels between abortion, the slave trade, and the Holocaust. I'm drawing a blank on names, but if you just Google it, there'll be some great pro-life books out there that elaborate on the point that you very validly raised.
John, thank you very much for that call. Stephanie, as you're speaking, I'm thinking in the early days of the abortion debate, you could always say, well, it's a women's rights against the kind of thing, and people still say that. But today, we're creating human beings in laboratories and growing them through the embryonic stage for no other reason than for scientists to study them and to do experiments on them. That is slavery. That's just outright slavery. You've taken a human being and made it the object for someone else to use.
It is using another person. And what's interesting about that is this, on one hand, people will say, we don't know when life begins. We can do an abortion because the fetus isn't alive. And yet, on the other hand, there's the creation of life in a lab, as you pointed out, whether people are going to implant the embryo or whether they're just going to do destructive research on the embryo. But the point is, we know when life begins because those in the business of making life are doing it in a lab, and they're trying to create the moment of sperm egg fusion, the moment of fertilization. So therefore, to then claim we don't know when life begins and abortion doesn't kill a life is intellectually dishonest based on other activities that are immoral that are systemic.
And it strikes me that even if you were one of those people who was convinced of a woman's right to choose and all that, that's totally unrelated from this. I'm not one of those people. I'm not convinced of that we have a right to choose to take someone else's life. But even if you were utterly convinced of that, creating babies in labs has nothing to do with that. Creating babies in labs so that you can study them is just outright exertion of raw power over another human being.
And again, we look at history to see that humanity has done that before, and we look back and recoil at that. You look at during the Holocaust, the hypothermia experiments done on the Jews and other victims. And we say, goodness, you can't experiment on one group of humans just to get information that would be beneficial to another group of humans. So if that principle applies in general, then it applies specifically in the context of embryonic research, the way it applies specifically in the context of the Holocaust.
Kathleen in Midland, Michigan, listening on AM 1440. Kathleen, you are on with Stephanie Gray. Your question, please.
Hi, yes, thank you for taking my call. Okay, my question is, what do I say to people who say, okay, what about if we take away abortion, then we'll end up with more children in foster care, and who's going to take care of all these people, all these children in foster care, because there are too many kids in foster care and there aren't enough people to adopt them?
Yes, it's an important question to address. And I think one way to address it is to say, I agree with you that it's a problem that there are children who are not in forever homes. I agree with you, it's a problem that they're bounced around from one foster home to another. Adoption is the ideal option. And because we both recognize this is a problem, and there are some very tragic situations where children are being treated poorly in the foster care system, would it ever be ethical to end the life of a born child in the foster care system because the circumstances of that child are quite miserable? And of course, the person's going to say, well, no, you can't kill someone in the foster care system. So then I would ask, why then would we ever say it's acceptable to kill the preborn child because they may at some point in the future be placed in the foster care system? And if they respond and say, well, wait, that's different. A child in the foster care system is a human being. An embryo or a fetus isn't a human yet. If that's the answer you get, what that shows is we really need to convince the person that the embryo and the fetus are human beings. just not the foster care system, that science has established life begins at fertilization, that two human parents will only produce human offspring, that because the embryo and fetus are growing, we know that they are alive. And so going through those basic facts can enable us to say, as much as there are problems, killing shouldn't be the solution to the problems that we face in society. And then you can also point out that there are couples waiting and willing to adopt. And there are other people who, if they carried their pregnancies to term, wouldn't place their child in foster care or an adoptive home, but actually do have the support around them to parent the child on their own with a loving community. And it's often convenience that causes them to reject carrying to term. But if they actually carried to term, they would have a supportive community.
Okay, Kathleen?
Yes, okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen. We have to take a quick break. Stephanie Gray here with us for the rest of the hour. Next hour, Dr. Edward Sri will be here, and we're going to talk about having your life transformed in discipleship to Christ. He's got a brand new book about that just out. We'll be right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
January is Pro-Life Month, and to get as many people as we can involved in the pro-life cause, we're making Trent Horn's book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and his DVD, Making the Case for Life, available for just $5 each. That's a savings of over 70%. Both the book and the DVD were made specifically with you in mind, to help you engage in sustained and meaningful dialogue and to give you the tools you need to change people's hearts and minds so that together we might build up a pro-life culture, one person, one conversation at a time. To get your copies of the book, Persuasive Pro-Life, or the DVD, Making the Case for Life, for just $5 each, just call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com.
Whatever I have learned, writes Catholic Answers founder Carl Keating, I have learned from the masters of the craft. In his new book, Booked for Life, a bibliographic memoir of an accidental apologist, Carl gives future generations a roadmap of what it takes and what it means to become a Catholic apologist. In the way only Carl can, he recounts numerous real-life situations he has encountered in his long career that illustrate the apologetic lessons he's learned. Then, drawing on a lifetime of experience, Carl reveals the books that helped him learn to defend the Catholic faith. Order your copy of Booked for Life today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
I told you it was going to be a super good Wednesday. Dr. Sri coming up next hour talking about discipleship to Jesus and how that can transform your life and really bring healing and into your life and a real change of heart. Many of us are waiting for that. And he says, well, there's a way to think about discipleship that can really, really transform your life. Get you out of those stuck places into new places that Christ wants you to go. This hour, Stephanie Gray, our guest, and we are taking all comers with questions about pro-life issues. It's a pro-life open forum. 888-318-7884 is our number. We have another Kathleen on the line. This Kathleen is in northern Minnesota listening on Real Presence Radio. Kathleen, your question for Stephanie.
Yes, hi. I've got a couple. I was in a conversation with 3 other women, and they were discussing their abortion views, and I did not have an answer. I just stood there and listened, and I said a few things, but I wished I would have had more to say, and I was going to put across a couple of things and hoping that I would just turn the radio off then and listen to your response once I asked the questions. But one woman said that she was feeling that the United States should support money for other countries in this world for abortion because she said her mother had jumped from a height in order to try to, end the abortion. She said that's what the women did over in her country so they wouldn't have to be pregnant. And she said that was, I don't know, she said it didn't obviously work for her mother because there she stood, and then another one beside her said that what switched her over to be pro-choice was the fact that the statistics were, and she gave the example of Texas, so I don't know if this is true or not, that Texas, once they legalized abortion, the number of abortions that took place were fewer when it was legal than when it was illegal.
All right, Kathleen, let's take that second one. Can we start there, Stephanie?
Sure. Yeah, the reality is, I can't speak to Texas specifically, but if you look at, quite frankly, the abortion statistics in the United States and around the world, when abortion became legal, abortion numbers have dramatically increased. So they have not stayed the same. They have not gone down. They have increased to the point that there are 1 million abortions every year in America, and there weren't 1 million illegal abortions prior to 1973. So the legalization has resulted in it becoming very common. And I think, we can look to countries where abortion does not happen, such as Ireland, which has one of the best maternal mortality rates in the world, better than the United States, in fact. So there is an environment where if people said, well, if abortion was illegal, women are going to die. On the contrary, in that country where abortion is currently illegal, although there are efforts to try to change that right now, but in that country where it's currently illegal, you have very good maternal health care. And in other parts of the world, we don't necessarily see that. I would make the point that where abortion became legal, such as in South Africa, maternal mortality has increased rather than decreased. So I think for people to make the claim that, when it becomes legal, it's going to be safer for women, that isn't necessarily the case. The more fundamental principle is, what does abortion do? If it ends the life of an innocent human being, then we may not legalize that just to try to improve the circumstances of those who are born. If we really care about women, when a woman is in crisis, we're going to want to get to the root of why she's in crisis. We're going to want to ask her, why do you want an abortion? Why are you so desperate that you would, in fact, harm yourself and not just your preborn child, that you would put yourself in a risky environment or a situation of grave danger through perhaps an illegal abortion with someone who's not skilled at what they're doing. And so when we can identify what their fears are, then we should work to alleviate the circumstances and the suffering that they're in rather than work to eliminate their child. There are ways to help women in crisis that don't actually involve killing an innocent human being. So it's not, we have abortion or women are going to resort to desperate measures. It's possible to not have abortion and to help women so well that they also don't resort to desperate measures.
Okay, Kathleen?
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to keep moving as quickly as I can because we got lots of calls still to get to. So we go to Italy in Midland, Texas, listening on Sirius XM satellite radio. Italy, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Yes, mine has to do more with fertility side. I would like to know what the views of the Catholic Church are on taking fertility drugs.
General standard the Church communicates is that it may be ethical to aid the marital act, but not replace the marital act. So for example, in vitro fertilization would not be ethical because that means the human being is created outside sexual intimacy and instead being created in a lab. So that replaces the sexual act and therefore isn't ethical. But there can be times where the sexual act is aided. So for example, if a woman isn't ovulating, that's a sign of her body working improperly. There's a pathology there that needs to be corrected. So for her to take medicine that would cause her body to ovulate is to actually restore her body to its natural healthy state so that when she then engages in sexual activity, there's the possibility that she could now conceive a child. So that would be an example of aiding the sexual act, not replacing it in order to create a life. That would be acceptable with the important caveat that the amount of medicine and drugs given to her to aid her body in ovulating not be too high so that she would unnaturally ovulate a large quantity of eggs. Because if she releases a large quantity of eggs, all of those eggs could then get fertilized through one act of sexual intercourse. And if she then gets pregnant with 5 or 6 embryos, that puts her life in danger. It puts the embryos' lives in danger. So it's important that she be given a quantity of a medical intervention that would only cause her body to release 1 or 2 eggs, which would naturally happen in a woman's cycle.
Okay, Italy?
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
You're
We'll go now to Tony. And another Canadian. Boy, you are bringing the Canadians out of the woodwork, Stephanie.
You know, we're a friendly bunch.
Yeah, that's right. Listening on Ave Maria Radio. Tony, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Hi, Stephanie. My question is based on pro-life being a movement from the beginning of the baby towards the end of life, rather than like today we hear on the radio mostly about the babies being aborted, rather than also looking at it as a life movement whereby families are supposed to, we talk about the family life too, because poverty does create abortions. So like we have to look at it as a bigger object. We have to have bigger objectives rather than just life at the beginning, but family also has to be considered. And that's what's going on in the minority communities, and that's why abortions are pretty high there, because family formation hasn't started properly. And also, we have politicized this movement such that it's mostly Republican, rather than saying we all are human and we should all value life. Not Republican, not Democrat. We are all equal. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Sure, you know, there certainly is a great need to help people in the circumstances they're in to alleviate their suffering so they don't resort to eliminating their child. And this is where I would say the movement has actually done a very good job with its pregnancy care centers, its homes for pregnant women, with religious orders like the Sisters of Life, who allow pregnant women to live with them and allow them to live with them for a period of time after birth as well with the child, as the sisters work to help the woman get on her feet, get a job, go to school, and receive an education. So there are some exciting and positive things happening in that regard. Certainly there's always more that can be done, but there is some good news happening there. And I would say that certainly we need to value all life, and that's ultimately what the message of the church is about. The gospel message is about loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. The pro-life movement has taken on a very specific cause of the cause of the babies, because this is such a widespread injustice, and there was this sense that a group of people need to focus specifically on that, the way if someone's fighting cancer, they focus specifically on cancer. If someone's fighting AIDS, they focus specifically on AIDS. And when you focus, you know, like become a specialist in educating people on one subject, it doesn't mean there aren't other important subjects, but there is that acknowledgement that he who fights everywhere fights nowhere. And one organization or one cause cannot necessarily take everything on. But something as big as the church, the Catholic Church, which has 1 billion members around the world, is large enough that it is living the gospel message, not just on one issue, but on all issues, that communicates the message that we need to value the dignity of persons in all ages and all stages, and work to create a society that is truly just.
Tony, you still there? Does that work for you?
Yeah, but the political movement, there is a political movement like that identifies this with maybe Republicans mostly, and whenever you turn on Catholic radio, it is more biased towards Republican.
Are you saying?
And
so
I think that is
can I just clarify something, Tony? So are you saying we need more pro-life Democrats?
No, not only Democrats, but we shouldn't be tagging it with Republicans. We should be tagging it with humanity, not politics. Because politics, when it comes into the game, we're trying to hide the other things that the Republicans do bad, and that's actually a turnoff on most Democrats who might turn into pro-lifers.
I see. I don't. I mean, it's up to people to choose to be pro-life or not. However, if I'm not exactly sure what's the practical thing you're asking us to do.
And when we talk mostly as Republicans rather than as human beings. We are not political. Christ was not political. It's a Christian movement is totally away from politics. I understand politics does help life, but we cannot ignore the errors of the Republicans too.
Okay, Tony, I'm sorry we hear the music, so we have to get going,
Yeah.
though. But I thought we did the whole hour without talking politics till we got there, unless I am mistaken. Did we mention that earlier? And I missed it?
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, okay. Oh, you couldn't hear me. Okay. Because we've had a little bit of sound issues this hour. Stephanie Gray, the author of Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth. If you would like to know more about Stephanie, just go to loveunleasheslife.com. I'm sorry I didn't get to follow up. I wanted to hear more about the debates coming up. But people can find about that on the website. Is that correct?
They can. Loveunleasheslife.com.
Thank you for a very, very helpful hour. Really appreciate it, Stephanie Gray. Dr. Edward Sri, next hour, we're going to talk about transforming your life through discipleship to Christ. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and as promised, Dr. Edward Sri with us this hour. His latest book is Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ. Dr. Sri is the author of many books. He is the Vice President of Mission and Outreach at the Augustine Institute in Denver, Colorado. He's one of the founders, with Curtis Martin, of Fellowship of Catholic University Students, probably one of the finest Catholic outreach groups in the world. Really, really impressive. Most recently, before this, his latest book was Who Am I to Judge? Responding to Relativism with Logic and Love. As I said, the new book is Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ. Dr. Edward Sri, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I tell you what, I love the book, and I really like that this idea that maybe more needs to be said about discipleship, because we talk all the time about being disciples of Christ, but I think that has a tendency to become maybe I don't think cliched is the word, but kind of just it becomes part of the furniture, and we don't really think about what it is to be a disciple.
Yeah, this is a really important theme in Scripture, and it's certainly one that Pope Francis has been emphasizing. We see it a lot in the U.S. Bishops' Conference and many dioceses and parishes, a lot of things being written on this topic. So a lot of people in pastoral ministry today really turning to this important biblical theme of following Jesus as a disciple. But I want to write this to help give a little more clarification. What do we really mean by discipleship? We can come up with our own little definitions and ideas, but in the end, I think it's always best to let God's word really speak to us. And so that's what the book starts off doing, really grounding it in Scripture, putting the reader into the world of what it was like to be a first century Jew who might be a disciple following a rabbi, or what would it have been like to follow Jesus as a disciple? What was that relationship like? And then make the connection to what does that tell us about our walk with Jesus today? And when we go into the Scriptures like this, it really provides a great spiritual roadmap for our own pursuit of Christ and holiness, relationship with Him, and then also grounds us in the key habits we need to really follow Jesus effectively today.
And so you start with the story of Peter, and I was struck by that because I had never known. Maybe I'm admitting ignorance that I shouldn't admit, but I had not known that part of the gospel where the risen Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" that he uses two different forms of the word love there, and that the first two times he's talking about agape love, which is really hard, self-surrendering love. And then, you tell it, because I think it's very important to understanding what it means that Peter is a disciple of Christ.
Yeah, this is something Pope Benedict himself has drawn out beautifully, and I'm just building on him and his beautiful insights. But I put the reader in the shoes of Peter, and this is that famous conversation along the Sea of Galilee after the resurrection. Jesus says a simple question: "Do you love me?" And at first glance, we as readers are going, "Of course, Peter loves Jesus. I mean, this is the guy that dropped his fishing nets and followed Jesus. This is Peter, the rock upon which the church is being built. Of course, this should be a no-brainer. Peter loves Jesus." But the word that Jesus uses in the Greek text, at least, would make Peter pause. It says, agape. Do you love me with that, as you described it, that total, unconditional, sacrificial love, the love that Jesus models on the cross? Jesus isn't talking about ordinary human affection, ordinary friendship. There's another word in Greek that he could have chosen, philia, to describe that. But he says, no, do you love me with this higher level love? And I think Peter, maybe earlier in his career, in all of his youthful zeal, he probably would have said to Jesus, "Oh yeah, of course I give you agape love. Yeah, I'd go to prison with you. I'd die with you." That's what Peter said. But after Holy Thursday, remember what happened then? After denying Jesus 3 times, we have a more humble, deep Peter here. It's a beautiful moment because Peter comes back and he says, "Lord, you know that I love you. And that's what it says in English. But if you look behind the English, the word for love is not agape, what Jesus used. It's the word phileo, describing that philia love. You know, you, Lord of all people, know how far away I am from agape. The best I can offer you, Jesus, is my weak, imperfect love, philia. And I love that moment because it's a moment of humility for Peter. This isn't the sanguine Peter earlier in the Gospels. This is humble, honest, self-awareness here, and he accepts where he is. And then Jesus will ask him a second time, once again, do you give me agape love? And it's, no, I can't do that, Jesus. And finally, at the end of the story, Jesus changes the word. He doesn't change the standard of love, but he comes down to meet Peter where Peter's at. And he says, okay, Peter, do you love me with filial love? Can you get? I'll take just that.
Yeah.
And then Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know that's all I can give you. And I love that because it's beautiful for us to know that we want to give God, this great, perfect love. But most of us, right, if we're honest, we're going to go, we're not there yet. We're like Peter. And Jesus, thank you for being willing to take even this weak, broken love that I give you, this imperfect love, because Jesus wants to take that, and that's the starting point for our spiritual life to take off. If we dare to meet him there, he'll take our weak filial love and then transform it into agape.
888-318-7884 is our number if you'd like to talk with Dr. Edward Sri about being transformed through discipleship to Christ. 888-318-7884. And I suppose maybe one of the temptations we have, or I don't know if it's a temptation or a burden that we carry, maybe they're the same thing, is that I've got to get my stuff together and get in order and then present myself to Jesus as a as a candidate for discipleship. But the story that's why I love that story about Peter is that's not at all how it works. It's after realizing I cannot do this. I can't, as like you said, Peter wanted to follow him to death and prison and all, but he just couldn't do it. And it's after that discipleship begins. It's with the realization that, that's the point of discipleship, is he's going to give it to me. He's going to make it possible for me to do this that I want to do.
Yeah, that's the most amazing part of the story is once Peter acknowledges, again, earlier he would have said, I give you agape love, but now he's humbled and he goes, I can't do it. That's when Jesus comes in and does this amazing work in Peter's soul. Right away, the gospel story, you can read about this in John 21, tells us that Jesus starts talking about how one day, Peter, you will live agape love now. One day you're going to be taken where you don't want to go, and your arms are going to be stretched out. And it's a prophecy about how he's going to be taken to Rome and imprisoned there, and then he's going to end up having his arms stretched out and crucified upside down in Nero's circus. So Peter will indeed live cruciformity. He's going to live Christ-like agape love, right? But it had to begin here at this first moment of presenting himself as he really is. And I really like how you said that too often we want to present ourselves in the ideal. This is what I wish I could be. And then when I get my act together, then Jesus will love me, and then I could be a good Christian disciple. Right. No. The first step of discipleship is admitting I can't do it. and once that happens, great things can start to take off in our spiritual lives.
Right. 888-318-7884, our number. Dr. Edward Sri, our guest. We're talking discipleship with Christ, and the discipleship in the way that you explain it and understand it and give us to understand it in this book. It's not maybe like what we see on TV with the TV preacher who talks about discipleship, or maybe even not quite what we're getting in catechism class maybe. The biblical idea of discipleship is something really all-encompassing.
Yeah, to put ourselves into that first century Jewish world, what did it mean to be a disciple? If I had to pick one biblical word that really gets to the heart of discipleship, it would be the word imitation. Imitation. The idea is that if you're a disciple, you're not just showing up at your rabbi's classes and taking notes and passing an exam like we do in modern university settings. No. You share meals with him, you watch the he studied, he interacted with his family, he served the people, he debated other rabbis, and the whole way of life of the rabbi was meant to rub off on you. You were imitating his way of life. And so when Jesus is gathering disciples, what does he do? He takes them on basically a 3-year camping trip. They go camping all around Galilee for 3 years. And if you've ever been camping with someone, you really get to know them, don't you?
Right.
But the disciples, that's what they're doing. They're watching Jesus pray. They're watching him forgive sinners and help the poor and heal the sick and reach out to those that are the outcasts. And that whole way of life would have left a greater impression than any single lecture he gave. And so Jesus himself says in Luke 6:40, when a disciple is fully trained, he becomes like the master. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're called to do. We're following Jesus today, and if we want to follow him as disciples, that means we're striving to imitate him. We want to become like him, and I think that's the real challenge here. Just because we're Catholics who go to church on Sunday, we love Catholic things, we listen to great Catholic books, we go to pro-life conferences, we're very orthodox, all of that is wonderful. That's essential to be a faithful Catholic, indeed. And yet Jesus is asking for something more. He doesn't just want us to get the right answers on a quiz. He doesn't just want us to show up on Sunday. He wants our hearts and all our hearts. Are we striving to become more like him, to think like him? Are we striving to weigh the things of this world the way Jesus would weigh them? What's important to Jesus should be important to me. Or do I sometimes think, well, this is really more important, and I spend all this time and energy doing stuff that isn't really at the heart of what Jesus is all about? Am I really striving to imitate Christ? That, I think, is the crucial question for us today.
Again, Dr. Edward Sri, our guest, our number 888-318-7884. One of the things that strikes me, too, about this book is the deep, profound, and convincing sense of hope that it has, that life actually can be transformed. I think many of us maybe who have tried, the various diets or tried the various workouts or all the things that we keep still being us, have a tendency to think real transformation is not possible. That's not what this book would suggest to you. Into his likeness, be transformed as a disciple of Christ is the book. More with Dr. Edward Sri and your calls right after this.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
January is Pro-Life Month, and to get as many people as we can involved in the pro-life cause, we're making Trent Horn's book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and his DVD, Making the Case for Life, available for just $5 each. That's a savings of over 70%. Both the book and the DVD were made specifically with you in mind, to help you engage in sustained and meaningful dialogue and to give you the tools you need to change people's hearts and minds so that together we might build up a pro-life culture, one person, one conversation at a time. To get your copies of the book, Persuasive Pro-Life, or the DVD, Making the Case for Life, for just $5 each, just call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com.
Whatever I have learned, writes Catholic Answers founder Carl Keating, I have learned from the masters of the craft. In his new book, Booked for Life, a bibliographic memoir of an accidental apologist, Carl gives future generations a roadmap of what it takes and what it means to become a Catholic apologist. In the way only Carl can, he recounts numerous real-life situations he has encountered in his long career that illustrate the apologetic lessons he's learned. Then, drawing on a lifetime of experience, Carl reveals the books that helped him learn to defend the Catholic faith. Order your copy of Booked for Life today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Pope Francis said, all of us are called to mature in our work as evangelizers. We want to have better training, a deepening love, and a clear witness to the gospel. St. Paul Street Evangelization's online School of Evangelization will equip you with the tools you need to be an effective evangelist. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you're unable to give, we'll set you up for free. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Are you ready to be transformed through discipleship to Christ? This book will really help you into his likeness. Be transformed as a disciple of Christ, the latest book from Dr. Edward Sri, who is at the Augustine Institute there in Colorado. You've been on sabbatical for a little while, but you're back to teaching, right?
Yeah, I just launched back in. It's great to be back in the classroom. We've got a great crew of students here on campus, and many studying with us from around the country, around the world through our distance ed program. So I'm just thrilled to be back teaching again.
Well, we're really glad to have you here. We have lots and lots of callers. How about we head to some of those callers and take folks' questions on discipleship to Christ?
Great.
All right, let's go to Todd in Houma, Louisiana, listening on 690 AM. Todd, you are on with Dr. Edward Sri. Your question, please.
Hello, how are you doing?
You're doing well, Todd.
Sri? Is it Dr. Sri?
Dr. Sri, yes, SRI.
Okay. I listen to National Public Radio from where I am, and I've this morning they had a feature on loneliness and the ramifications that has on the United States. As a matter of fact, Great Britain, I heard on the news, had a government post dedicated to loneliness. But what I would like to say is that I think that the Catholic Church and Christianity in general has a prime opportunity to emphasize that there is an interior life that transcends the personal loneliness that one can feel.
Todd, I'm going to let Dr. Sri respond to that, and we'll come right back to you. But that's a striking point. Dr. Sri, how do you respond?
Yeah, and I think this theme of discipleship is really helpful for that point. Certainly, as the modern world has turned away from the gospel, has turned away from just traditional values of family and friendship and virtue, it's not no surprise that people experience greater loneliness, insecurity, just a sense that they're not really known, they're not really loved. And we have a wonderful opportunity, as you say, and not just opportunity, but responsibility to go and share God's love with people, that they know that maybe they haven't experienced great love in their families, maybe they've experienced brokenness in their marriages, maybe they're just they're just unknown in the world that they're living right now, and yet that's those souls that are lonely are so loved by God. This is the mission of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa saw not just the poor on the streets, but she had a vision of when she was called to start the Missionaries of Charity. She had people from all over the world in this vision, all different kinds of people, and they're all reaching out to her in this darkness, and they're reaching out to her and saying, "Come, show us Jesus." And that was the mission that Jesus gave her. He certainly was to serve the lonely that are suffering on the streets of Calcutta and in poverty around the world. But as Mother, because it wasn't a material poverty. That's easy. You can solve material poverty in the sense of you give someone a blanket, you give them some food, you give them some money. But the harder forms of poverty to solve are those that are lonely, those that don't experience love. And I've been blessed to go to Calcutta, and I've talked to the sisters there, and many of the sisters who are working all over these really, really hard, poor conditions, they told me that the hardest place they ever served was the United States of America. Not even close to Calcutta. Calcutta is so much easier to serve. Why? Because in Calcutta, they at least have families. They at least have people who love each other and they care for each other. I mean, they have breakdown too, but more than the United States. The United States has a great hunger for love, and we need to bring the love of Christ to those people.
Todd, does that address what you were getting at?
Right. I'm just wondering why the Catholic Church doesn't put more of an accent on the interior life, and there is a way that one can be self-satisfied and inner-directed so that we're not vulnerable to our surroundings and circumstances in life.
Dr. Street?
Yeah, and on that point, I have a whole chapter in this book. It's called The Primacy of the Interior Life. Because first of all, I mean, I need to experience love from other human beings, but fundamentally I need to know that I'm loved by God. And that comes with my own divine intimacy, my own personal encounter with Jesus. And so I think you're right on that that's a crucial thing. And at the same time, I would say because we're human beings, we're made for relationship, we're made to live in community. Unless you have an extraordinary call to be a hermit and to live a solitary life, most human beings are we're all called to have some kind of interaction with others. We encounter Jesus in fellowship with other people. So amen to interior life, and that we've can overcome our loneliness by knowing how loved we are by God. And yet at the same time, as human persons, God wants us to experience his love also through other people. And so let's go out and reach the lonely with the gospel and with our own love.
Todd, since the point that you are making is actually a chapter in the book, I'd like to send you the book. Can you just hang on, Todd, and we'll get your address, and I'll send you a copy of Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ, Edward Sree's latest book. And I appreciate the call there, Todd. We go now to John in Lawton, Oklahoma. It says King of Eternal Glory. I don't think you are the King of Eternal Glory, John. You must be listening on King of Eternal Glory Radio.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm out in Lawton, Oklahoma, listening on KOEG, King of Eternal Glory Radio.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Your question
that would be amazing if Jesus was calling in.
That would be. I don't feel prepared
Dr.
somehow.
Street, my question is, I'd like to go back to that theme you were developing before about agape versus philios. And the question I have, I guess, is kind of a technical one. Because from the conversation you were having, one could have implied that Jesus spoke in Greek to Peter, which is not likely the case. So what I'm saying, I guess the question is, are there corresponding words in Aramaic that would allow accurate word-for-word translations by the selection of the Greek words agape and philios, or is it possible that that difference is really an artifact of a translation gap between those languages? And I'll have to take my answer offline, but thank you for hearing me.
Oh, beautiful question. I love that question. And I will say this, in terms of is it directly corresponding to the Aramaic? I don't think so. I would want to look in that to make sure. But I don't think that there would have been the original like that. But what we do know is that the Holy Spirit is inspiring this text. And St. John, the beloved disciple, the one who authored this text, was there, and he was there when this conversation was going on. And I think the Holy Spirit and St. John both know that this is a beautiful theme of what Jesus is doing with Peter. And so it is in the inspired text of sacred scripture, and the Holy Spirit and St. John himself were wanting us to just notice, it's a slightly different word there, and that's maybe pointing to something. So great insightful question, though. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for calling from King of Eternal Glory Radio. 888-318-7884, our number. If you'd like to talk with Dr. Edward Sree about being transformed as a disciple of Christ. I said earlier, Dr. Sree, that there's a great sense of confident hope here that Christ really can change us, really can heal us. Why do you have that sense of hope that Christ will really do this for me?
Well, first of all, because he said he would. That's what he wants to do with all of us, right? And then we have the witness of the saints that I bring into that section of the book a lot, that these are men and women who really they've transformed. They've gone through great struggles like we do, and yet they've made it to the other side. So first of all, just Scripture tells us very clearly that what are we made for? We are made for transformation in Christ. We are made to be changed, St. Paul says, into Christ's likeness from one degree of glory to another. So that's what we're made for. But when we stare at ourselves, we look at ourselves and go, well, we're not quite there yet. I'm not yet all glorious. I got a lot, maybe some noble qualities, but I got a lot of other areas where I need to work on. And how do I get from where I am now to where Christ wants me to be in perfection with him, transformed in him. How do I get from A to B? That's what discipleship's all about. And we come to see, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, that we can't do this on our own. It's not like I just muster up some willpower and I'll just make myself really holy and I'll acquire one new virtue every single week. You know, the Nike approach does not work for spirituality. You remember the old Nike slogan, you know, just do it?
Yeah.
You know, I think what happens is we as Christians, we want to try to do it. We learn something about the faith. We want to be better, and we sincerely. But we realize we can't fully pull it off. I tell the story in the book of my daughter Eleanor, and I think she may be listening inside the house with my wife now. But little Eleanor is my little 20-month-old now. But earlier in the fall, you know, she was having her older siblings trying to teach her how to jump. And they were all encouraging her, oh, everybody jump, jump. They make a big circle around her. Come on, Eleanor, jump. And then she would, you know, squat her knees down, get in launching position, and she'd get all excited. But then she'd try, but she couldn't take off. And then she'd bend down again, and she'd try again. And she'd bend down a third time. And then after a while, she's just frustrated. I can't do this.
Dr. Sweet, we have to hear the rest of the story on the other side. Sorry, we'll be right back on Catholic Answers Live.
Okay, great.
Every question is important. Ask yours today on Catholic Answers Live.
It might be said that anti-Catholic notions of the Church's history are the original fake news. With all the misinformation being spread, where does one look for the truth? In The Real Story of Catholic History, Professor Steve Weidenkopf gives you the facts on over 50 of the most common misconceptions about Catholic history and shows how to answer them simply and powerfully. Whether it's to answer claims about Catholicism's supposedly pagan origins, old myths about the Inquisition that never seem to go away, or more modern errors that anti-Catholics put forth, The Real Story of Catholic History is an essential resource for every Catholic's bookshelf. Order your copy of The Real Story of Catholic History today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As the legend goes, the Protestant Reformation began when Martin Luther nailed a list of his grievances with the Catholic Church to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany. But do you know the whole story? In Catholic Answers' brand new documentary, The Protestant Revolution, you will hear from top apologists Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin, Carla Broussard, Trent Horn, and Steve Weidenkopf as they expose the errors of Martin Luther and of the other so-called reformers. This DVD will give you a clearer understanding of our Protestant brothers and sisters, and you will be better equipped to engage them about what separates us and about what unites us. Order your copy of The Protestant Revolution today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting shop.catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
You know what Catholic radio is? It's training for the troops. It's a interaural of the ear boot camp. The folks who listen, who grow in their faith, grow in charity, grow in all the virtues, they then go out and exert an influence far beyond just themselves. Catholic radio has an exponential effect for bringing people deeper into the faith.
Dr. Ray Garindi thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
And welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for joining us. January is Sanctity of Life Month, and still marches going on in various places, all kinds of walks and marches, and just the fact that you didn't see it on ABC or CBS or NBC, don't let that dissuade you. There were hundreds of thousands of people out there marching. You didn't imagine it all. It did, in fact, happen. But in celebration of Sanctity of Life Month, or in commemoration, I suppose, of the 45th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision, we'd like to give you persuasive pro-life, how to talk about our culture's toughest issues at the lowest price that we can, and that is $5. If you'd like Trent Horn's magnificent book, Persuasive Pro-Life, for $5, just go to shop.catholic.com. Also, his DVD, Making the Case for Life, How to Talk About America's Toughest Issue, that also is there for just $5 at shop.catholic.com. These are some of the best resources available to equip yourself to answer questions put to you from those who support abortion. Shop.catholic.com. Right now, Dr. Edward Sri is our guest this hour. Wonderful new book from Dr. Sri, Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ. It's from Ignatius Press and the Augustine Institute. And Dr. Sri, lots and lots of calls about discipleship to Christ. Shall we go back to the phone lines?
Let's do it.
Oh, no, we can't. Because you were telling us about Eleanor who was trying to jump.
Little Eleanor, yeah, okay, so I was telling the story. I use this as an analogy that my little daughter who's trying to jump, she'd squat down, get in launching position, but just couldn't get up in the air, and then all her sisters are trying to cheer her on, you could do it, and she still couldn't take off, and then after a while, I was trying several times and never getting lift off, she would just get frustrated, and that's what happens in our own spiritual lives, that we want to be better. We want to improve in a certain area of our life. We want to be better at committed to prayer. We want to be more generous, be more kind, and we find ourselves just not making that much progress, and we can get frustrated. And that's precisely our Peter moment. You know, that's when we become like Peter, and we're like, Lord, I can't give you this agape love. But this is the beautiful opportunity we have, is to say, but Lord, this is who I am. This is the best I can do all on my own, and I trust that you'll come down and meet me where I'm at. And that's what I do a little, and I'll bend down, I'll pick her up, and then I give her a big ride, and she loves flying through the air, but she can't do that on her own, certainly not yet.
Yeah, so that's the analogy, though, isn't it? That we need him to do it. We can't. I mean, I suppose in a certain way he wants to be to us as you are to Eleanor, that you don't intend to be doing it for her forever. You intend to give her the power, the strength that's needed to get liftoff at some point. Not that she'll be completely separated from you. You're her father, or that we'll be completely separated from Christ. But if we won't accept that we can't do it, but he can, we're just not going to make progress.
Exactly. When we are utterly convinced of our own littleness, how small we really are, how weak we really are, it's at that moment that God really blesses us and does extraordinary things. If he sees, he's just going to try to do it on his own, they're like, okay. I see my kids, they're going to try, I'll let them just keep trying. But then when they I can't do it, that's when I come down, and then I'll help them. And they get much higher than they could ever do on their own. And that happens with us, with the Lord as well.
And the chapter on real healing, real change, it's kind of the heart of the book. It's preceded by a chapter on forgiveness. And I really do think, taking calls here every day, I think very many people have a hard time accepting that they are among the forgiven, so to speak. Somehow I'm an exception to the rule that Christ forgives, heals, and changes us.
Yeah, I think we think, that God, we have to earn love. We have to earn God's love. We have to earn his forgiveness. That's just the world we live in today, right? I mean, how many people grow up thinking, love is based on how well I perform, how I treat others. Do I succeed? Do I achieve a lot? Do I present a good image of myself, so that people like me, or I keep a certain dysfunctional family member happy so that then I can win their love? I'm always trying to do something to win love. But what we come to see is we encounter a God who reminds us so clearly that love cannot be earned. Love cannot be earned. It can only be received. And that's why it takes sometimes those Peter moments in our lives, those moments of humility, moments of brokenness, where then God comes in and we experience, and I still love you, even though you failed. I still love you, even though you sinned. I still love you, even though you did these horrible things. Or I still love you, even though you feel like junk inside and you feel like people don't treat you well. Whatever it is, when we experience God's love at that level, that's an experience of God's love that just turns our world upside down and changes everything. Because then moving forward, I go forward in my spiritual life, and just life in general, with a real confidence, a confidence that's based not on me and how well I perform and how well I keep other people happy. No, it's a love that's based on God himself, his love for me.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number. Dr. Edward Sri, our guest. We're talking about discipleship and the real change, the real healing that comes from being transformed in discipleship to Christ. We go now to Mark in St. Charles, Missouri, listening on 1460 AM. Mark, you are on with Dr. Edward Sri.
Hi, thank you. Dr. Shree, I got to say, first of all, the book on the Mass was the greatest book I've ever read. Thank you so much for that book. I even bought it for other people, and they liked it also. But my question is that you brought up a point about transcending. I don't feel like I can get to like the Saint Teresa of Avila to her depth. Is that attainable for everybody?
I want to make sure I heard you say Saint Teresa of Avila, but what part of Saint Teresa do you feel like you can't attain?
Like one with God.
Oh, totally being at one with God, like the deepest level of the interior castle. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, well, here's the thing, that Jesus said that we're called to be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. He said that he wants us to be transformed in Him. So these are things that He's calling us to. And it reminds me of something that even St. Therese of Lisieux, another Carmelite, marveled at, that she saw that God gave a commandment, that is to love others as He loved us. And she was just overwhelmed by that. How could I possibly do this? I can't love like Jesus did. I can barely love just on a human level. And that's when she has this realization that I can't do it. That's true. I simply can't on my own. But God's going to have to do it with me. So now when it comes to the idea of being at one with God, I mean, that's what we're all made for. We're made for that. And we're going to have that if we're faithful, either in this life or ultimately we'll have it in the fullest form in heaven. But the saints do stand before us, reminding us that they did achieve this profound union with God, like St. Teresa of Avila experienced. But it wasn't a sanctity that was all about just never having stains on your shirt and being perfect in everything. In other words, we sometimes think sanctity means there's no little stain on my soul, I never make a mistake. And I quote this beautiful line from Pope Benedict about what holiness really consists of. He says, "Holiness does not consist in never having erred or never sinned." And he says, look, the saints, if you look at the saints, they were men and women with complicated problems like we have. The difference between them and us is that they persevered, they abandoned themselves to God, and trusted in Him to work through those difficult challenges in their lives. And because they then relied on His grace in the midst of their weakness, they really were changed. Pope Benedict goes on to say, holiness, he says this, quote, "It is not the fact that we have never erred, but our capacity for reconciliation and forgiveness which makes us saints." And so if we long for that union with God, we don't have it right now. Tell God that. Say, Jesus, I want this union with you. I want to be better in this area of my spiritual life. I know how weak I am. When He sees us coming humbly like that, like Peter did, that's what He just rushes down and He blesses us, and He'll lead us a couple more steps closer to Him. But it is a lifelong journey of being ever more transformed, as Paul says, from one degree of glory to another, from one incremental growth after another.
Mark, I wonder how that strikes you.
It gives hope. The only thing that concerns me is, like, he's talking about humility. Sometimes that pride gets in my way, it seems like, and I don't feel that. I just feel that I have to. I want to take control, and I don't always do the humility as much as I should. And
you know what, Mark? I got to tell you, I'm hearing you, and just the fact that you said pride gets in your way, you want to take control. The fact that you're admitting that is like the first step of humility. There's a lot of people that go through life that they're not even aware of it. They have no self-awareness. They're not even trying to work on it. The fact that you know that, this is the beauty of what the saints say, is that you've got a little weakness like that, to simply name it and say it to Jesus. Jesus, I often want control. I often struggle with pride. That actually is the first step of humility. So you already, I can tell, the fact that you're seeing something in yourself, if you continue to persevere in prayer, persevere in going to the sacraments, going to confession especially, and most of all, just what you're doing right now is an act of growing in humility, going humbly before God and admitting, I don't have it all together. When we are convinced of that, that's when God starts to do really amazing things in our soul.
Okay, Mark?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, God bless you, brother. Thank you for that call. It's hard for me to identify. I'm very good at humility. It's one of the things I'm best at. I feel really confident about that. But why are you laughing? That's serious. I mean, all right. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on the being transformed as disciples of Christ with Dr. Edward Sri right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers. Our success depends on you.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and I'm here with a couple of very special offers for all of you interested in standing up for the rights of the unborn. January is Pro-Life Month, and to get as many people as we can involved in the pro-life cause, we're making my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and my DVD, Making the Case for Life, available for just $5 each. That's a saving of over 70%. I wrote this book and I made this DVD specifically with you in mind, to help you engage in sustained and meaningful dialogue and give you the tools you need to change people's hearts and minds, so that together we might build up a pro-life culture, one person, one conversation at a time. To get your copies of my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, or my DVD, Making the Case for Life, for just $5, call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com.
Just like the saints of the Counter-Reformation, our own souls are in constant need of reform, of reconversion to God and His will for us. We struggle with sin. We become distracted in prayer. We find it hard to be loving and easy to be selfish. In Reform Yourself, Sean McAfee shows you how these magnificent saints can be guides to your own personal transformation. We all need to reform our souls. Let the saints who reformed the church show you how. Order your copy of Reform Yourself today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Wouldn't it be great to have a book to give to anyone to explain exactly why Catholics believe what we believe? Why We're Catholic is the groundbreaking book by apologist Trent Horn, that one book you can give to anyone as a starting point for helping them to find their way into or back to the practice of the Catholic faith. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's a tough life spending an hour with Dr. Edward Sri talking about discipleship to Christ, but I just have to muddle through the tough parts of my job. Discipleship to Christ really, truly can transform your life, and I suppose it's one of the temptations of the devil that to say, oh, it won't work for you. That Jesus stuff works for other people. It won't work for you. Well, if you need help getting over that, maybe that sense that your life is lacking that kind of transformation, I will highly recommend Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ, the latest book by Dr. Edward Sri. Our number here, if you'd like to talk to Dr. Sri, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. You kind of conclude the book talking about discipleship today. So you start with that idea of, well, if you really want to understand what discipleship is, you got to look at how the rabbis of the first century lived and how people basically, became part of the life of their rabbi to learn from him how to be a holy person. But where do we go with discipleship today? What's the role of discipleship today in the world?
Yeah, there's a beautiful image in the rabbinic period that I love to apply to today, and that is this. If you met a good rabbi, they would say, cover yourself with the dust of the rabbi. Cover yourself with the dust of the rabbi. It drew in an image of how the disciples would follow their rabbi on the streets, literally, so closely that the dust that was kicked up from the rabbi's heels would start to cover some of your garments. And so the idea is you want to follow your rabbi so closely. Our rabbi is Jesus Christ, and we follow him today, 2,000 years later. We may not be walking on sand, but we're walking on pavements of stone, and yet how do I draw so close to him that his life just is showered over me and begins to change me? Well, in the last part of the book, I identify the 4 key habits of a disciple. This is not I'm very clear on this. This is not Ted Sri's idea or his favorite 4 things to do. So, there's many creative ways you can talk about discipleship. But I think, again, it's always important to ground these things in God's Word. And sacred Scripture in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, specifically singles out 4 of the key practices of the earliest disciples. Right there at the beginning, right after Pentecost, what did the disciples devote themselves to? These 4 things are so important that the Catholic Church, throughout the centuries, has always turned to these 4 elements in Acts 2:42 to sum up the Catholic faith. The whole catechism, the 4 pillars are built off of these. So what are they? Prayer, fellowship, the sacraments, and the teachings of the apostles. So what do we mean by these 4 things? Well, first of all, I need to have a committed life of prayer, not just saying some prayers, not just going through devotions and saying, even the rosary or the Mass, which are the beautiful, devotion and Mass is the highest form of prayer, but to make my rosary praying or my Mass or my frequenting of the sacraments bear as much fruit as it can, I want to make sure that those graces are falling on the fertile soil of a deep interior life. Do I take, 20 minutes a day to just spend quiet time in conversation intimately with Jesus, maybe meditating on the Scriptures, doing Lectio Divina, some spiritual book, and I'm talking to him about it. I need that for my own spiritual life. I need the sacraments. I need to then go encounter Jesus, especially in the Eucharist and in confession. I need fellowship. It can't just be me and Jesus on my own. I need other brothers that are running with me. Do I have people in my life that are striving after the same noble ideals of following Jesus? And do I encounter Jesus in the people in my life? Really seeing that every day I have opportunities to love Jesus in my wife, in what she may need from me, and what's happening in her life, or in my children, or in the people in my life, and especially in the poor. Do I encounter Jesus in the people in my life? And then lastly, we need to feed our minds with the truth. The teachings of Jesus is handed on through the apostles, especially in our day and age where so many people are filling their minds with all this stuff from Hollywood, the secular media, social media, and that stuff shapes us. What we put in our minds begins to shape our imaginations and our desires. I want to make sure I'm looking at my life and pursuing the most noble things, and so I better feed my mind with the Scriptures, the Catechism, and good shows like Catholic Answers.
Yeah, you could say that again. But
So really, it's a part of feeding our minds, right?
Right.
I'm sure it's entertaining and it's fun to have on in the background when you're cooking dinner or driving home. But at the same time, I know what Catholic Answers does in bringing on good people, not me, but other people out there that can explain the truth better. But all of that is helpful for forming the mind. It's better than just feeding your mind with what comes out of the secular world all the time.
888-318-7884, our number if you'd like to talk with Dr. Edward Sri about discipleship. One quick question before I do go to calls. I suppose Pope John Paul II, and it may well be that Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, it's the same, but following the Second Vatican Council and the exhortations of the Council Fathers, Pope John Paul II talked about mission a great deal. As a matter of fact, it was like a papacy of trying to get people to take up the mission. Could you just say a quick word about the connection between discipleship and our mission?
That might be a follow-up book here, because my book is focused on this. But the point is this: if I've truly encountered Jesus, if I begin to experience His love, His forgiveness, His healing power in my life, I experience the change. My life is better in following Jesus. If I see Christ makes a difference in my life, I want to just share Him with other people.
Yeah.
So the idea of mission and evangelization isn't like, oh, that's an extra thing for like the really super Christians. No. If you are really a true follower of Jesus, a true disciple who's encountered Jesus, then you naturally are driven to want to do all you can to share Him with other people. So that's why I love the imagery that Pope Francis uses of missionary disciple. Any disciple is called to be a missionary, and if you're doing any kind of apostolate work, you better be a disciple first.
Well, you phrased it in a very positive way. I think I was thinking kind of negatively, like, don't try mission if you haven't tried discipleship.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole, I think that's, the papal nuncio recently talked about, missionary disciple, yes, but disciple first.
Yeah,
In other words, it flows. Any kind of mission has to flow from our own encounter with Christ.
Again, 888-318-7884, our number, 888-31-TRUTH. We go now to Gil in Manhattan, New York, listening on Catholic Radio there in New York. Gil, thanks for calling. Your question for Dr. Sri.
Catholic Answers very much. I have a question about John 15:12, where Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." How would that apply to discipleship and evangelism? Because I know that in Acts 2:42 it says they devoted to the apostles' teaching and the breaking of bread. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to follow the question there. So love one another as I have loved you. Yeah, I think that would relate to one of the points in Acts 2:42 about fellowship, right? I think that's the point I was making there, is that we're called to love Jesus in our neighbor. You know, whether it's the neighbor in my own home, my own family, whether it's my colleagues, the people in my neighborhood, whether it's the poor, I'm called to love Jesus. So love one another as I have loved you. So I'm called. That's a crucial part of my discipleship. And I emphasize that because sometimes we can have a me and Jesus mentality. It's just about me and Jesus, my spiritual life, and I'm just focused on praying and praying and praying and studying and studying and studying, but it's just me and Jesus. Actually one key marker of growing in holiness that the saints describe is, how do you grow in your love of neighbor? Are you more gentle with them? Do you notice you're growing in patience with them? Do you notice yourself growing in generosity and service toward them? Especially when they irritate you and they hurt you, how do you respond? Do you respond like Jesus, who said, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do"? Do you respond with great compassion on those that may not be living a great life? That's a sign of Christ's life transforming your heart. So I think what you're hitting on, love one another as I have loved you, that would be a great scripture verse that could really be at the heart of that idea of Christian fellowship that Acts is describing. One of the key habits of a disciple is to love Jesus in our neighbor.
Well, how does that strike you, Gil?
That gives me hope, because the Bible says, "And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit whom he has given us," according to Romans chapter 5, or whatever verse.
Gil, indeed. I'm sorry, I was waiting for Dr. Sri, but I think we got a three-way thing going on here that got a little confused. But Gil, I always appreciate it when you call. Appreciate the question. Thank you so much. 888-31-TRUTH is our number here. Dr. Edward Sri is our guest. Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ is the book. I did forget to mention, you're doing a podcast now. You want?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, for a couple of years, people have been asking, "Dr. Sri, you got to start a podcast?" And I'm just like, I'd love to, but I've just been busy. And finally, this last year, I started one. It's been fun. It's called All Things Catholic. So if someone goes on iTunes and just searches my name, Edward Sri, they would find it. And I just did a fun episode. I had my first guest on the show, and she's a really honored guest. It was my wife, and we were talking about things we wish we knew before we were married. So it's really fun kind of podcast. So it's all about just understanding our faith better so we can live it out more.
Right. So you can get the podcast at edwardsri.com, right? Is that correct?
They can go right to my website, edwardsri.com, or they can go on iTunes and search my name, Edward Sri, there, SRI, or go to Google Play, and they should be able to find it there as well.
And they're probably going to find Symbolon as well. Isn't that what you're most well known for, Symbolon?
That has been a program I'm so excited, so blessed to have been a part of. I think the new Mass translation, when that came out, every parish was using that. So that, I think, a lot of when I travel around the country, that's probably the one I hear the most about from people using it. But certainly Symbolon is a program I know thousands of parishes using, especially for RCIA. Such a blessing to work with the team at the Augustine Institute and so many of the professors there, and then many other teachers and our awesome video crew to help unpack the Catholic faith for people. So that was definitely a great blessing being a part of Symbolon.
Dr. Edward Sri is our guest. The book, Into His Likeness, Be Transformed as a Disciple of Christ. You mentioned before how the whole third section of the book, the last section of the book, gets to those four key things that come from Acts chapter 2. The teaching of the apostles, fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayers. I want to go back to fellowship only for this reason. We had a caller earlier, a call about the isolation in the world today, the loneliness, the vast loneliness, really. It's kind of an epidemic. Can you say a word about fellowship as part of discipleship?
Yeah, again, I think, when I think about fellowship here, why it's so important, we can forget this. We could think, okay, hey, my faith has taken off. I'm learning a lot, learning apologetics and learning about the Eucharist, and I'm doing all these great devotions. But if I don't surround myself with some other good friends that are pursuing the same things, I'm not going to be challenged to live out as well as I could. It's kind of like my wife is a distance runner. She loves to run. She's a number of half marathons, a number of marathons, and but when she could go out for a run, and she'll go out and run on her own. But she loves to go on a Saturday morning longer run. But she's less likely to accomplish just on her own. But when she knows she's got a friend, and she's got a number of friends here in the Denver area that she'll just go on a run with. Like, do you have that running partner, not just for physical running, but do we have that for those who can run with us after Jesus? Like, they're running after the same things. Yeah. So whether I'm a single person on a college campus and I'm the only person, I feel like I'm the only really devout Catholic there, that's going to be hard for my faith to survive if I'm just on my own. I need to go find other Catholics who are on fire.
I didn't watch the clock right. We got to go. Dr. Sri, Ted Sri, thanks so much for being with us on Catholic Answers Live.
God bless.